thought the...
I'll look at the camera to open.
Yeah.
Hello, I am really excited to have Speaker JD Mesnard here with us today, who just spoke to the Arizona Chamber's Public Affairs Committee. I have a few questions for you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it on Facebook Live with us.
Happy to be with you.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with the good stuff. The governor's rolling out his budget today. What would you like to see in it?
I think he's given us a good indicator of what his priority is going to be in terms of new spending, and it's a priority.
Okay. Quick technical difficulties. So, so to follow up on K-12 education, Arizona's K-12 students are making best in the nation progress academically, according to the nation's report card. And so I think that's gotten that's got very little media coverage. And are you surprised about that? And some have attempted to continue to push the narrative that Arizona schools are failing. And I'm not sure where that's coming from, and what are your thoughts on that issue and the lack of coverage?
I'm glad you brought that up. That has been a growing frustration because while we certainly have areas where we can invest more, should invest more, while we have made some tough decisions during the Great Recession and scale back in areas where we had to, there is a lot to be praising about the current state of our education system. And yet some folks out there who have an agenda or whatnot, I guess they thrive on hysteria or feel like it's only through that approach that they're going to be heard or get more resources. We all want to get more resources to K-12. It's about the full package and making sure that we also have a balanced budget and we're not taking more money from our taxpayers in the process. So I'm disappointed that the media hasn't covered it more. I think you're starting to see it a little bit more, but for the last few years, because it's not really a new thing, they bought into, I think, that hysteria. Maybe it was better news, better headlines or whatnot, or frankly, the legislature is an easy punching bag. And so hopefully moving forward, those sorts of gains and all that we have to be proud of, not that, again, we can't continue to improve and invest in critical areas, but we can also be celebrating our successes along the way.
Absolutely. I really appreciated what the governor said in the State of the State, that we would never be done with K-12 education.
That's absolutely right.
And so that's always going to be a focus area. But every piece of news I've seen lately is Arizona appearing on another list for a high-performing school, or big gains increases in reading and math. There is a positive message, I think, to be had out there.
Yep.
So moving off, actually, let's stick with K-12 education. The legislature and the governor last session expanded access to empowerment scholarship accounts, or ESAs, but the law's on hold because of the referendum by anti-school choice activists. Do you think that the legislature should respond to that referendum in some way, or should we just hash it out in November at the polls, if that's what it comes to?
Sure, that's a great question, and one that we're still working through in all candor. So right now it's in court. We're trying to figure out, did the petition effort follow the proper process in this referendum? I don't think that they did, but ultimately a judge or some level of court will tell us what they think, and then we'll be able to make a decision. If they say that, yes, this followed the right process, so it's going to go to the ballot in November, there are many of us, and part of me feels this way, that want to have that discussion at the ballot, that believe that the vast majority of voters in the state of Arizona see the benefit of school choice, and don't buy into, again, the hysteria of the other side, that it's like if you are supportive of alternatives in education, whether it be charters or private schools, that somehow that's an attack on public school. As a school choice advocate, I support all of the above and that approach to education. So we'll be having a discussion on whether it would go to the ballot, whether we would repeal it, because one of the reasons we consider repealing it is that anything that goes to the ballot and passes at the ballot, even if you love it or certainly if you hate it, you would be concerned about the inability to adjust because of the Voter Protection Act. And a lot of what we do at the legislature, we don't intend to be in stone. That's why we exist, is every year to adapt and make tweaks to existing law. And yet when something passes at the ballot, it for all practical purposes is locked in stone. So that'll be part of the discussion. Right now it's too early to say what we'll do.
Okay, wonderful. And for our viewership, just because we just talked about how a lot of people probably don't even know what ESAs are.
Yeah.
What's an ESA for the regular person out there who hasn't been following this?
ESA, in the case of Arizona, stands for Empowerment Scholarship Accounts. In some states, it's referred to as an Education Savings Account, which is an ESA in either case. but essentially allows a parent to send their child to a different school other than their local public school, and that a portion of the resources the state was using to fund their education in the public school goes into an account. And that account, it's kind of like a debit card, goes to specific education-related expenses, tuition being, of course, the largest one. And so it creates another option for parents. Right now, Arizona has narrower eligibility. It's only certain populations that can qualify for an ESA. What the bill did was establish universal eligibility, but cap the number so that you didn't have a total breakdown of the system. And that number ramps up to still a very small number, even out in 5 or 6 years. So again, it's another tool in the toolbox for parents who want to have access to other means of educating their children.
That sounds like a great initiative. I know some parents, and they find a school that is the right school for their child that might not necessarily, the funds usually, or might not necessarily follow that student to their school, and this would make it so for certain populations.
Exactly. It is where the funding follows the student, and that's what we want. I support public schools, but it's not about public schools. It is always, in all cases, about the children, and I'm convinced that a parent always knows more and always cares more about the future of their children than any bureaucrat would.
I think that's absolutely correct. I appreciate you saying that. All right, totally different topic. Moving on to the popular tax issues that we want to talk about. Every year, there's a tax conformity bill that makes sure, the state legislature is conforming to federal. And it's usually a pretty boring bill. Usually isn't in the headlines, but this year might be different because states are adjusting to tax reform at the federal level. Do you have a sense yet of how the federal tax bill is going to affect Arizona, or is it way too soon to tell because we're still trying to figure out how that's going to impact Arizona?
Yeah, so we got our first sense really from the Department of Revenue yesterday, or within the last couple of days, basically suggesting that if we do nothing, in other words, we base our income tax code on federal adjusted gross income, which has now been redefined and reinvented. If we do nothing and just continue to base it on that, what it will actually mean is, because the federal adjusted gross income is broader, it will mean a tax increase for our state taxpayers automatically if we don't intervene and change our own state income tax code. And it's to the tune of quite a range. We're not exactly sure, still exploring, but $50 to $250 million in increased taxes. When you're talking about the $3-ish billion that we collect now, that's a huge percentage increase, 8 to 10% more. So it's something where we need to definitely probably reinvent our own tax code. Conformity in Arizona usually happens in reverse. So, for instance, in the current 2018 year, we would conform for tax year 2017, which just ended, and nothing was different at the federal level. But I don't really think it's wise to wait until next year, the 2019 session, to figure out what we're going to do on income taxes, since it could be radically different, and we should have some predictability, some indicator of the direction we're going during the current tax year as it unfolds. So I'm going to be advocating for rebuilding our state income tax code from the bottom up, using what the feds did, which I think was phenomenal, by the way, as an opportunity to advance our own state income tax reform.
Now, I've heard you describe yourself as a tax nerd before. Yeah. Are there any other tax issues that you are looking forward to at the legislature this session?
So one of the issues that we've been tackling over the last few months is exploring this issue of digital goods. We assess a sales tax on goods. We don't tax services. But when you get into the technological world, making a distinction between a good and a service can be challenging. And up until recently, up until the present, it's been Department of Revenue sort of just filling in the gaps. And that's really not their function. That's the policymaker's function. So we've been trying to better define what constitutes a digital good versus a digital service, because one is taxed and one is not. We're still fine-tuning what that's going to look like, but we've come a long way over the last few months. I applaud the business community for working with us and my colleagues in the legislature, in particular Mrs. Genti-Rita and Senator Farnsworth, who were co-chairs of this effort. And I'm optimistic we'll have a resolution this session on the issue.
Excellent. That is definitely a very hot topic I've heard quite a bit about from the business community.
Absolutely.
Switching gears one more time.
Yeah.
So the governor's identified occupational licensing reform as an area that he would like to focus on. In fact, he mentioned it in this week's State of the State, and the idea is to alleviate burdens that discourage entrepreneurship and discourage competition in a variety of industries. So what did you think about the issue as it was addressed at State of the State?
Yeah, the issue is consistent with what he's brought up before, and even what has been occurring at the national level when it comes to regulations. Are regulations truly necessary? If we're talking about health and safety, and not just little issues, but big issues of health and safety, that's what these boards are there to protect. But it also opens the door for protectionism and barriers to entry into the workforce, because once you've gone through a certain regulatory licensure educational requirement and you're out practicing, the more that join you, they're your competition. So if you can ramp up the requirements moving forward, well, that makes it a little harder for them and reduces your competition. I really don't question the motives of the vast majority of those who are these regulator types and on these commissions, but I think there are examples where it has been abused. To use an extreme, the Board of Cosmetology has come up and how much regulatory requirements are there, and whether or not somebody can volunteer to cut someone's hair and that sort of thing. And if you talk to some folks on the Board of Cosmetology, they'll tell you it's not always as simple as it sounds. On the surface, we have this visceral reaction. Why aren't we letting somebody do a good thing for someone else? But sometimes there's more to it. And I grant that there probably is, but I definitely think there's merits to tackling the regulatory framework we have, because in my experience, and I think some national comparisons would vouch for this, we have too much regulation here in Arizona.
I've seen an article where we're pretty high up there in
Exactly
licensing
right.
requirements compared nationally to other states.
Exactly right.
Full
That's not
disclosure.
something we want to be known for.
No, absolutely not. We're making so much progress in so many other areas.
Absolutely.
Full disclosure, though, I am a member of the Board of Cosmetology, recently appointed. So
congratulations.
Yeah, it's a very interesting experience and learning a lot about the industry.
Absolutely.
Last question I have for you. Still got some time with us. One of the issues that we've been digging into more and more at the Arizona Chamber is the modernization of transportation funding. Alternative fuels, driverless vehicles, ride sharing, and who knows what's next. New technologies means that we're getting far less, far less tax at the gas pump. So the gas tax hasn't been updated since the Clinton administration, which is shocking to me when I heard that. Has there been much discussion about Arizona and how we might pay for road maintenance and construction in the future?
There's been some, because you effectively have a tax cut every year. As fuel economies improve, you need to go to the gas pump less. That means you're paying less taxes, but roads get worn down at the same rate, and so it's a real concern that we need to rethink how we fund our infrastructure, because whether you're conservative or liberal, we all want an infrastructure that works for our society, and yes, it does take taxes. Some have proposed increasing taxes. I don't know that that's the way to go, but certainly revamping or looking at revamping how we fund our system so that you don't have this gradual decline every year in our gas tax revenues is something that has begun. And I have heard that the governor's interested in the issue, and every year we're kind of got to stay focused on one or two big issues. Right now it's education, of course, and some of these other issues like opioids and recidivism and that sort of thing. But I have heard that it's on his radar, and I suspect maybe perhaps next year it's something we will get much more involved in tackling.
Excellent. I have to tell you, I really respect the leadership that you've shown at the beginning, since you were a very first speaker, and I guess an intern all the way back at one point. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for speaking to the business community. And thank you for being so thoughtful about all of these very important issues affecting Arizona and the business community and the state at large.
Well, I enjoy working with you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. See you soon. Okay.